Good evening. We'll call this meeting of the Fargo Public School Board of Education to order. Thank you for coming. Welcome, everyone. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda with the HR addenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda with the addenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. Motion carried. Thank you. I will pass it over to Dr. Schatz. Dr. Gross.
Well, thank you very much. Next on the agenda is an opportunity for us to talk about our strategic plan in action and celebrating student success. I'm going to do a very brief introduction so that most of the time can be for the guests who are here. Tonight what we want to do is focus a little bit on project-based learning and how it ties to our strategic plan, and in particular helps us teach, learn, and assess the 21st century skills across our system. So to make some further introductions, I'd like to introduce Jodelle Teichen. She is our Director of Standards-Based Education, integral part of the professional development and the work that's being done around project-based learning and 21st century skills. And without her, we wouldn't be as far as we are. So with that, turn it over to Jodelle.
Well, thank you for having us here tonight. The group of students that are here are from Carl Ben Eielson Middle School, and they are going to ask you to be their board in terms of they're going to present something to you and have you give them some feedback about their presentation on a project called Your Hired Healthier Ways. And so I'm not going to give you a lot of detail about that. They're just going to present that. And one of the things I think, when I think about these Your Hired projects that we're doing across the system, we've really been working with our 21st century skills on how can we bring the community into that message. And so one of the things we heard at a recent focus group meeting was, what are the 21st century skills and how can we learn more about that, from our parents and our community. So this is one of the ways through these Your Hired projects. And we're really trying to go from pockets of implementation of 21st century skills, so a teacher who just kind of decides to do it or starts to like it, to really being more pervasive and have all students have this opportunity. And these Your Hired projects are really one example of that. So with the help of teachers who are willing to take some risks and people in the building who are willing to support that, we're able to do that. So I'm going to introduce the folks who are presenting tonight. Josh Rudy is a teacher, an 8th grade language arts teacher at Carl Ben, who's brought the students that he's worked with this year. And Paula Weiler is our instructional technology coach at Carl Ben, who supports these projects at Carl Ben Eielson. So with that, I'll turn it over to Josh.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to introduce these guys real quick. I'm not going to talk too much. The Your Hired event is, like Jodelle was talking, is our project-based learning. And as teachers, we got together and we're saying, what does the community need? We can't just teach worksheets in the same generic everything that's been done for forever in a school system. And part of that came up was we need kids to have experience in this 21st century skills where collaboration, communication, how can we be creative thinkers? How can we think outside of the box and really impact a real world environment that calls us to do something like this where, you guys don't sit down and get a worksheet that says what's 5 times 5. There's problems that you have to work through, and that's what they did. The Your Hired event was an awesome opportunity. A lovely lady by the name of LaCosta Potter from Seek came to us and asked if we'd be willing to do that, and we said absolutely. Basically, the whole event was these kids get a problem, a real world problem. This one was about school lunch, nutrition, and that's it. They have to figure out how they can create something with very little background knowledge. They have to do the research, they have to do the calling, they have to do the trial and error part of it. And that's kind of the beauty of this is when we sat down as a team of teachers, we're going, in our real life, what do we have to do to be successful? And it's that trial and error, and that, there's a big fancy word, the engineering design process of seeing a problem, researching the problem, finding an answer, figuring out that that's not the right answer, and then continuing on until you figure something out. Well, these guys get to find out just how frustrating real life can be through that process, and I'm going to have them come up and introduce themselves and kind of explain what that process was and what they got out of it. Come on, guys. They're a little nervous, so if you guys could grill them a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
So we're from CBE. Good evening, everyone. We're from CBE and we're the 8th graders. I'm Layla. This is Grace, Sydney, Devin, and Jaden. And yeah, we're going to talk about your hired event.
So the You're Hired event is about, it's like an all-day project for when we have about 5 to 7 students, and we have a Bearcat team, so it's like 8th graders are split up into 2 teams. So the Bearcat team did the You're Hired event, which is, we had like 5 to 7 students in a group, and we would all focus on the project of school lunches and how to make them better, and like just like figure that out, and like use critical thinking and collaboration and all that stuff. And we were just talking about, like, everybody would have a role in, like, finding data, taking surveys, and all that stuff. And, yeah, we just had that group, and we just thought about some stuff, and, yeah.
So the highlights of the project were of us like working as a group and collaborating together really. And the goal of this event was really for our team to like get to know each other better and like really be like getting close and understanding each other and that. And our group, we really put a lot of effort in this and we cared about the topic because it relates to us as teenagers who eat school lunches and everything. And we had many experiences through that, such as there was many roadblocks in it, such as the budget, where the budget we had to calculate it and find out how much our school like spends on school lunches. And we realized a lot of things were expensive in the form of those, where you like want fresh foods and it's really expensive to get that and what everyone wants, and how we tried to contact the program expert, but unfortunately we couldn't, so.
The process of doing this, we had to research about what program we use at Fargo, and we compared it with West Fargo and other schools. And we made surveys of kids during lunch and just what they like better than other things. And like Layla said, we looked at the budget and like realized how much that stuff does cost that we want. And we made posters and pie charts of our surveys, and that's basically what we did.
So for the You're Hired and lunches, we had some ideas, and the first idea was more appealing names. So if the kids wanted, okay, so like name them funny things or fun, so they like pick it instead of something boring, just like lasagna or like. And then we also had an idea for not all healthy stuff, because kids don't really like everything being healthy. So if we had a balance of unhealthy and healthy things, that would be better. And then our last idea was cultural options, so like culture week, so people could experience other cultures and cultural food.
And then the aftermath of our presentation, we had a poster. Unfortunately, we don't have that today, but some things we had on the poster were we took 2 surveys. So when we went to lunch that day, the first survey we took was we split up into groups, and we went around and we asked kids whether they got extras for lunch, which is like you could buy like chips or ice cream, or like there's like a lot of varieties of foods, or else if you got a school lunch or you brought a lunch from home. And then the second survey we took was whether you liked Chinese food or Mexican food or Indian food, and etc. And the data that we got from those surveys were on the poster, so we don't have that. But we, going back to the expert that we contacted, they didn't, the director from that program didn't answer our call because she was actually a judge for us. That was like, while we were presenting. So, and then our Phy-Ed teacher invited us to talk about how to kind of continue on and expand through the project. that we had, and so
Some things that I forgot to tell you guys, these fancy manila colored folders, I put those on your desk. That was the packet they got. They were just handed that packet that said, "You're hired." And it really just broke it down into what was expected. And the neat thing about this is they got to ask us as teachers 3 questions the whole day. The rest they had to figure out on their own. They had to problem solve. They had to understand, you know, like they were talking, what are the roadblocks and what is this going to look like? And at the end of the day, and I forgot to mention this, and I should have, but they present to a board of kind of esteemed, highly established individuals in our community. We asked former teachers, former doctors, lunch staff came up, and so they really kind of got raked over the coals a little bit. And it was really interesting to see that we have a lot of young entrepreneurs in our group. And, you know, when really pushed to it, they come up with some amazing things and things that I won't even think about. And, you know, I'm sitting here, you know, I've, you know, degrees and yada, 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 and I'll take their stuff every single time. So it was a great experience. And the whole project-based learning was, we really wanted to focus on, yes, we have an academic side to where, you know, as a language arts teacher, I really want them to know argumentative writing and narrative and stuff like this, but they have to be exposed to this is kind of how the world works, and you're not always going to have an easy answer, and you're not always going to work with the easiest people. This group is an exception to that. They're very awesome kids, but just how that works and how we need to find a solution to a problem and just in that multitude of different ways. And then tying that in, we had Paula Weiler. She's going to talk about how we're going to use a project or a tool called Compass to where we can really look at the data behind this and see going forward, okay, what do we need to change? How does this need to look going in the future? And figure out how we can make this just that much better of an experience, which it's already really, really good. We had positive feedback the whole way, but Paula will tell you about the data aspect of it.
Hi. I'm going to talk a little bit about how project-based learning looks in our school, and then I'll come back to Compass. So Carl Ben Eilson has sort of made a commitment this year that every team in our building is going to do at least one project-based learning. Several of the teams, and again, we have 4 6th grade teams, 2 7th grade, and 2 8th grade teams. Quite a few of the teams have taken this training through SEEK, and I've taken part of it. And Josh's team was one of the teams that had signed up for, I believe he had, 3 days in August or June, and then 3 again in August. So it's a pretty in-depth, long training, and you give up quite a bit of your time. But it was so helpful. The training was helpful to kind of understand the importance of project-based learning. And so we decided as a building that we're going to commit to at least one per year for everybody. And so far, everybody in our building has done one except for 1 7th grade team and 1 8th grade team. And neither one of them have had the training, not one person on their team, so they're all a little apprehensive about doing it. But we have a plan in place, and they're going to also be doing one. And now we are all starting second round PBLs for some of the 6th grade teams that did it. We have one coming up in a couple of weeks, so some of you may be asked to be part of our boardroom. So it's pretty exciting. I think that the students enjoy it. There's a few interesting aspects, like Josh was talking about how groups work together, and when you see 6th grade versus 7th grade versus 8th grade and how they work together and how they're able to pull the information together, it's really great. We're also working with SEEK to come up with some different ideas, some different PBLs, and then also trying to focus, like, this is a 6th grade project, this is a 7th grade project, this is an 8th grade project, because the packet that Josh, if he gave you a packet, that information is the same whether they're in 6th grade, 7th grade, or 8th grade right now. So, I mean, if you look at that, it's pretty in-depth. For 6th grade, that's pretty overwhelming for them to look at it and try and figure it out. So we're trying to simplify the language and make it a little bit more understandable and user-friendly for them. So that's one of the things that's currently being worked on, as well as saying that, you know, everybody in 6th grade, these are the projects that they can choose from. these are the projects in 7th grade and these are the projects in 8th grade, to make it a little bit more easy, so you're not looking at school lunch as a 6th grader, a 7th grader, and an 8th grader, okay? So I think it's pretty exciting, and I think for the most part, the teachers at Carl Ben are enjoying it. There's a few bugs that we still need to work out, but that's just the way it goes. As far as the tool to collect the data, Compass is being used, and I'm assuming that a lot of you have heard about Compass, a product that Stephen Duro and Jodelle have worked on for years to try and get it organized, to collect our data. And in that, there are rubrics for 21st century skills. There's also rubrics for different areas. Language arts will have their standards in there, and they have specific rubrics targeted to those standards. So what that does is each of the peers within the group can assess how they felt their other peers did. And so then they get the feedback from the peers. And then as a teacher, you can also assess how they felt the students did within the group. And then you also can do a self-assessment. So it's really nice that you can kind of see side by side, how do I think I did, how do my peers think, and how does my teacher think? So as I was talking to the 6th grade when we tried this out, I said it's gonna look pretty odd if you gave yourself 5s and your teammate or your other members in your group gave you a 1. You're gonna have to sort of think about, why are you thinking you're so great and they're thinking you're not? So, and hopefully they took that to heart. Anyway, so that's how we've been using Compass. And so far, we're still in the process of trying to figure out what to do with that data and how to move forward. But nonetheless, it's pretty exciting that we're kind of moving forward in the right direction. So.
Thank you, all of you, for sharing what you did with your You're Hired project. We have, starting tomorrow, there is a school-wide You're Hired event at Ben Franklin. And so the 6th graders in the whole school, actually today, were introduced to the problem this afternoon. And tomorrow afternoon, they'll present to their board. And we have over 3 days, so tomorrow and then 2 days next week, we have over 100 community volunteers coming to Ben Franklin to help judge these projects. So it'll be awesome. I asked how it went this afternoon, and there was one team who had never done something like this, never done a project-based learning, anything, a 6th grade team. And the students, probably similar to how you guys were the first time you did this, were lost. And as teachers, it's a big risk, because as teachers with middle school kids in that age in particular, you can lose control pretty fast in that environment. And so when it's a project that's designed to be out of control, really to put the control in their hands, that's a big risk, and it's a big learning curve for everybody involved, even particularly the students. They want to go ask their teacher, what do I do next? And by its very design, the question is turned back to you. What do you do next? So I think those are some of the things that are challenges and things to kind of the training really does help with. How do you manage that? But in all of our efforts with 21st century skills, I think we're just really trying to make that learning visible. I feel like when you say to a community member or a teacher, what are 21st century skills, those 4 C's, critical thinking, communication, creativity, collaboration, people say, well, yeah, we do that all the time. And of course we do that all the time. But do we do it intentionally? Do we really help students reflect on, was I a good collaborator today? What does that mean? What does it look like to be a good listener? What does it look like to have a good discussion with someone? And that's really what we are doing with the rubrics that Paula mentioned and the tool Compass, is to have kids really reflecting on that and make that learning really visible. So I think that's all we have. Certainly, if you guys have questions for the students, I guess now would be a great time for that.
Great, thank you, Jodelle. Dinah.
I'm not sure, excuse me, I'm not sure if it's a question or just comments, but I've been a judge on the You're Hired panel several times, and I really appreciated this particular topic, because the very first time I felt like the topic the kids were given, they had no comprehension for what that was about. It didn't reflect their real world view. So I guess my question for you guys, if you have done this multiple times with different topics, did you ever have a topic that was really not connected to your daily lives, and how do you see the difference between what is and what isn't?
I think in 7th grade we did a flu and how to prevent sickness. and I don't know, that wasn't really interesting for me. But this year, it was much better because I actually cared about it, and I wanted to change school lunches, and so yeah, it was much better for me.
Great, thank you.
Brandy?
Great job, you guys. I was over at Ben Franklin and was on the panel as a judge, and it's pretty neat that you guys get to elaborate on the school lunches and come up with great ideas, because you guys will be the ones that are eating it, so you have to come up with the idea. Great job.
I've been a judge for several of these myself, and the judges never get feedback. What would you say to your judges? Have you received good, productive feedback that you've been able to use to improve yourselves, or poor feedback, or what works for you from the judges?
Well, I definitely feel like we have really gotten positive feedback because, as Mr. Rudy said, it is the real world, and we have to like face the reality of everything. And then I feel like realizing the truth and like what can stop you and what can't stop you is really like good feedback, and how to work around that and how to like take that and interpret it and make it into something else as a new path.
Actually, I was pretty fascinated by the entire presentation you five did, but I do have a question. What was the favorite unhealthy food?
Most likely chips.
Well, all I have is chocolate.
Nicely done. Anyone else? So I'd just like to thank everyone involved, and Jodelle and your team. I think all of us have learned so much when we have judged these events, and they're terrific. And so thank you for taking the time to come and share this with us. We really appreciate it, and thanks for all your good work. Great job. I'm on Team Salt, so I'm sorry I didn't bring any chips for you. Okay. Becky Baki with our report from the foundation. Thanks for being here. Hi.
Tough act to follow. It was awesome. Thank you all for having me tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about what the foundation's been up to this past year and kind of some of the things that are happening right now. Our primary mission is to enrich and enhance learning opportunities for the students and teachers and staff of Fargo Public Schools. We go about that in a variety of ways. One of the main ways is through innovative education and literacy grants. We also do it by providing endowed and annual scholarships, as well as Adopt a School program. And we do things like the Critical Needs and Got No Milk program, which all enhance the experience for students at Fargo Public Schools. This past year, 2015-16 school year, we granted out over $55,000 in innovative education and literacy grants for Fargo Public Schools students. And I think what really stands out for me is some of the other opportunities this opens up for the district sometimes. On the side, there's some grant highlights. And one of those grants is Journey to America. We initially funded that grant through the Eleanor Lang Law Grant, which is for literacy grants. And since then, I believe they've been able to also secure a Bush grant to continue that project. And I think it's grown and really made a big impact at Fargo South because of the diverse population that they have there. I think that besides opening doors and creating bigger projects, a grant as small as $500 can make a discernible impact. That example to me, this last fall we had an event at Trollwood where we showcased some of our grants and programs that we help fund through the district. And one of those grants was called Let's Go to the Zoo, and it was a Fargo North grant. And I think it was only a $500 grant, but its impact is really immeasurable. The quote that you see in the report, it says, "One student, always a curmudgeon, his favorite word is no. He smiled the moment we arrived at the zoo and was delighted all day. Joy is hard to find some days. On this day, it was everywhere. I really think that, I guess I'll call it an impact statement, really shows the difference that these endowed funds can make, and the annual donations we get through innovative education grants just make on a day-to-day basis just that small little impact and what it did for that for that student during that school year. Some exciting things for this year, we were able, working with, and I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Joe Dell for helping out with this, and Dr. Schatz. In 2016-17, we have 3 grant rounds a year. We have one for Eleanor Langlaw, which is a literacy grants, and we have a deadline of October 1st and February 1st. So there's another one coming up. But this year we integrated the Fargo Public Schools strategic plan within our own grant process so that we're making sure that we get the most impact for our grant dollars for our donors. So we integrated Strategic Initiative 1, which is the Student Achievement and Growth Initiative, and 2, which is the STEAM concept. And Jodelle and her team were very helpful with that. We were able to send the grants that were submitted over to them, and then along with grant review, we were able to get some great feedback from them to make sure that we weren't duplicating, to make sure that all the different technologies were compatible, and just to make sure that we were, in line with what was happening with your 21st century learning skills. And I think as we move forward, we'll continue to do that. It was a great process for grant review, and it was really, they made some really good decisions based off of that. There was, $55,000 in grants, 42 grants from last year. This first round, I believe we gave out just under 10,000. I think there were 8 grants. And then February, we'll have some more coming up. Other ways that we're making an impact to help kids so that they can achieve the great, sometimes we fund things like critical needs in the Got No Milk program. I think the impact that the critical needs program makes is if kids aren't worried about where their next meal is, if they have warm coats, hats, mittens, whatever that need might be, we're able to send dollars over to the school district twice a year at the beginning of each semester for critical needs at each school. And those dollars, it's up to the school to decide how to disperse them and quietly go about and help kids to make sure that, if their self-esteem, their general wellness, all leads to success in the classroom, I think, and they're able to focus on learning and receiving the great education they're getting at Fargo Public Schools. The other big project that we work on raising money for is the Got No Milk program. Excuse me. We raise money for that in 3 ways: through annual donations, through Giving Hearts Day, and through Haley's Milk Run. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Haley Delaneva was a student at Hawthorne Elementary, and she decided that she wanted to help the kids in her class who couldn't receive milk. And since then, that was 5 years ago, and since then, they've raised over $100,000 for milk at Fargo, West Fargo, and Moorhead Public Schools. And what's great about it for us is each year they've allowed us to use that for Giving Hearts Day match. So we're able to help double their donation and kind of compliment them on their hard work. So that's actually coming up in a month. February 9th is Giving Hearts Day. We'll be raising money for Got No Milk again. We've secured Haley's Milk Run match of $9,300 and also a $1,000 match grant from the Dakota Milk Foundation. And we're going to have a little event. We're going to work in collaboration with Trollwood and have a little milk and cookie event on that day. So more information to follow on that. We'll get that out to you. So that should be fun. The other bigger thing that we do is the scholarships and awards through the year, at the end of the school year, really. We give out 45 endowed and annual scholarships to all 3 schools and Woodrow Wilson, as well as manage the Fargo Area Dollars for Scholars program, which gives out 50 scholarships annually. So we're always busy with that every year. We're starting to get ramped up for that, get applications out to the school, and get everything up and running for that. I think those are the big highlights for the year. We do have our 5th annual Alumni and Friends Breakfast coming up in April 19th. It's from 7:15 to 8:30. It's going to be at the Ramada Plaza and Suites. Last year, we had Joe Bommersbach, or Blind Joe, there, and he talked about how Fargo Public Schools influenced him in his career path. We will have a special guest speaker this year. We're still getting that figured out, but it should be good. It'll be a surprise. But any questions? Thank you much. Thank you for your time.
Terrific, thank you. Any questions or comments? Dinah, I know you're on the board. Do you have any cheerleading to do?
Oh, actually.
Christy's on the board now.
Christy's on the board now.
This is last year.
This is
last
last
year. This is, yeah, sorry.
My mistake.
You can cheer. Thank you. And I'd be remiss too if I didn't say thank you for the support the Fargo Public Schools District gives us too. Makes a big difference in what we're able to get done and accomplish. So thank you.
Absolutely. Dr. Schatz, you had to.
Well, I just want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing, and I think I made this comment last year, but each year we continue to see growth in this foundation and the work that they're doing, and I think that Becky has just taken it to a whole nother step.
Thank you.
And so the collaboration with the school district now is as good as ever, and with the alignment to the strategic plan, that was a huge move for the grants that they give out, so that we make sure that we're not just going all over the place with what people are doing. It focuses us back to what our initiatives are, just like you saw with the project-based learning. And so that was a great step to even going further with the foundation and that partnership. And so, and then I look at, when you just look at this document, this did not exist 5-6 years ago, this right here. So what you see continues to build and to get better and better. And so I believe in strong foundations for school districts, and what you're doing is setting us up for that bright future of a really strong foundation. So
Thank you.
keep up the good work, and your staff of 2.
Of 2.
Yeah, so thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jennifer.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So now I hear that you align to the strategic plan,
Yes.
but in addition to that, how do you decide sort of which categories to either seek grants or?
For innovative education grants, or in general?
In general?
Really, we focus on what we have in place already, because adding additional with 2 staff sometimes could be overwhelming. So we focus on another thing that we did this year was we brought money in through the Xcel Energy and the Verizon Foundation to help with STEM projects. Also, Joe Dell helping us out with that, so we were able to get a grant through Verizon for codable coding. I believe the Xcel grant helps out with transportation of a variety of STEM projects. So we focus on, again, coordinating, collaborating in the innovative education and literacy grant rounds to make sure that we're not only getting the most bang for the buck, basically, for our donors, we're also making sure that we're coordinating, collaborating, not duplicating, and dollars are just going willy-nilly everywhere. So we try to stay within the confines of this at this point.
Under the categories you have listed on, what is this page? Be the back side of the first page.
Yeah.
You have volunteerism. Can
Yeah.
you speak to that a little bit?
Sure, we have some of the grants in the last year's round. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head. I can look here. One grant was, I think this was this year's, they created, a classroom created birthday bags for the YWCA. And they went and they created them, they made them, they got the supplies for them, they made them, they dropped them off at the YWCA. That's one example of how that works. Yeah, yeah, you're welcome.
Anyone else? Well, thank you so much for the good work you do, supporting
you.
our district and supporting our students. We're truly grateful, and we'll see you early morning in April.
Yes, I appreciate that, thank
Be
you.
there. Thank you so very much. Okay, moving to staff reports. David Marquardt.
Hello.
Oh, I'm sorry. We don't, somebody was already on the agenda. Yep, we're good. Thank you. David. and
Hello, good
guest.
evening. I'd like to start off with introducing Connie Deutsch. She is on our executive board as our secretary, and she also does a lot of work with public relations with our annual Jeans Week that we do, as well as our Crystal Apple, which we give out once a month to members of FEA for the great things they are doing. And she's also in charge of our Facebook page and does different postings of things that are going on there as well. So we'd like to thank her for her work as well. And then during the day when she's here at the district office, she's the instructional materials manager. So she ensures that all of the staff have the materials they need to do their job every day. So thank you, Connie, for all you do for us. Along with tonight is the first night of the Citizens Committee for the election. We're doing some calling tonight. We have parents as well as FEA members at our office right now doing calling for 2 hours. For the next 8 weeks, we'll be doing calls for 2 hours from 5:30 to 7:30. And hopefully we have about 12, 14 people there each night, and see how that goes. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, David, and welcome to Connie. Thank you for all the work that you do. Anybody have any questions for David? Great, well, welcome and thank you, appreciate it. Okay, that gets us to something that I think we've actually been very eager to hear about, the long-range facility plan report and financial plan update. So Dr. Schatz, if you'll, Brock will start that out. Great, thanks.
Madam President, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to present portions of our strategic plan, specifically under Category 6, Equitable Resources and Planning Monitoring. We are going to tonight hear the introduction of 2 pieces, the annual review of the long-range facility plan report, and you'll receive the updated plan next meeting. Is that when we're bringing that? As well as the long-range financial plan. So to start with the long-range facility plan report, many of you know Jim Free, the Director of Operations Maintenance. He and his team are going to give you a little bit of a rundown of the things that we've done on our 10-year plan last year and things that we have planned for the coming year, and they are certainly integral parts of putting that together and carrying that out. So I'll have Jim and his folks introduce that. We can take some questions, and then I will do a little wrap-up at the end on this particular one as well.
Thank you. Before I start, I have to say I was impressed with the students that were up here, especially the teacher who said, I too was a judge at the board, and I wrote this down, he picks highly esteemed individuals. So I like that. Thank you. And the speakers get chocolates. How can you lose? So, well, thank you for the opportunity to share the long-range plan with us. As you know, the long-range plan, facility plan looks out 10 years. So that's not an easy thing to figure out what's going to break 10 years from now. But we try to do our best. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce 3 staff members who really make this all possible and make this work. These are the guys I go to for results, and I'd just like to introduce them now. First of all, Mr. Kevin Hagnes. Understand, Kevin? Kevin has been with us since 1998. I think you started as like right out of school or in school yet, a summer worker?
Yeah, you're on Florida.
Okay, very good. He has a staff of 15, and he is responsible for the grounds, delivery drivers, food service drivers, mechanic, all that type of thing. Responsible for 29.4 acres of parking lots, 27 miles of sidewalks, 25 playgrounds, 319 acres of green space, which almost 100 acres is irrigated, and then he moves countless items of mail, supplies, equipment throughout the district. It's a huge job. So thank you, Kevin, for all you do, and I appreciate that. So, also, just the fact he told me the other day, in the last 30 days, they've used 85 tons of salt and sand. So that's a lot of sand. So now we have to pick it up. That's the worst part at the end of the year. Yeah, that's his job, yeah. Thank you, Kevin. Also, Mr. Mike Semenko. Mike is the custodial supervisor. He's been with us since 1993. Mike has coined the phrase that we use a lot, is that our schools sometimes aren't schools, they're event centers. And there's so much going on in them. Several years ago at South High, in one weekend, we had a beauty pageant, a dance event, basketball game, theater production, and a speech meet, all in one weekend. And it's like, wow, you know, so there's a lot of activity going on in those bigger schools especially. Just a couple stats here. Mike manages a staff of 117 custodians, so that's a lot of people to manage if any of you have managed people before. He's responsible for cleaning 2,895,000 square feet of floor space, and probably one of the worst things is 2,158,000 feet of roofs. Roofs, I know, it's a bad day some days, yeah. 186 vacuum cleaners, carpet fans, 115, and 486 pieces of just miscellaneous equipment that we all wish we could run, but we never get a chance to. So anyway, thank you, Mike, for all you do. And then Jeremy Wolf, Mr. Jeremy Wolf. His title is Trades and Electrical Supervisor. He started in the district in 2007. Actually, I met him at Jefferson. He was building the Jefferson School as a head electrician for one of the electrical contractors in town. And then I said, hey, I think he'd be a great guy to work with, and it's been history ever since, so it's good. But anyway, he maintains a staff of 11, or has a staff of 11 people, plumbers, building automation people, HVAC, electrical, locksmith, carpenters, those sorts of people. He maintains 212 individual air handlers, 462 heat pumps, 279 exhaust fans, 459 variable air volume cabinets, 259 cabinet heaters and reheat coils. You didn't know you did all that, did you? Or you maybe did. And then just lots of 217 pumps that move hot water or chilled water. So it's a big job. Again, though, these guys do a great job, but without the 146 people of everybody combined, this is really not possible. So I just want to thank all those people that really, from evening custodians to these guys and everybody in between, it's just a great team. Dr. Schatzenbrock asked me to discuss some of the larger projects that we did last year. And so I'm just going to read down the list here, just so you know that, it is a big properties that we manage. Ben Franklin, domestic water pump replacement, domestic water lines in the basement in the tunnel, which turned out to be a very nasty job, crawling in those spaces that were designed never to have anybody in, it seemed like. And now you have to bring in a 20-foot piece of pipe that doesn't fit and all those types of things. Hawthorne roof replacement project, Madison roof replacement last year. South High had a roof section replaced. We did finish the existing building at the Eagles that we took out of our contracted maintenance. We added on to Eagles, but we sort of took on the remodel expense of some of those areas inside the building. South High pool pack and heating pump project. South High painting of the nanatorium, which is the pool entry area and the locker room. CBE had a paving project. Some Discovery heat pumps were installed. District office boiler replacement. Madison and McKinley both had updates of cabinetry. If you haven't been up in those areas, stop in and look. It's turned out pretty good. Trowood painting, staining of the pavilions and portable in the main building. Playground replacements. We did actually 4 playground last year. It was a big year for playgrounds. Hawthorne, Lincoln, Agassiz, and the Eagles. And then we did, in the process of updating all of the cameras in the district. Hopefully by July 1, we'll have all new modern web-based cameras. Some of you may remember when we bought those, there was a grant. And of course, when you buy everything at one time, they have a tendency to all fail at the same time. So that's been a struggle, but we're getting through that. With the help of Bill Westrick and his staff, it's been a good experience. The 10-year plan is really an ever-changing document. It's a living, breathing thing that we look at almost weekly and say, oh my, we have to move something back, or we did a little better on this project, we can move some things forward. But some examples of some of the unexpected expenses that we had last year is South High main water line broke and had to be replaced from the street. Of course, it broke in the wintertime. And, so we dug it up twice, I believe, right? And had to repair it. And then we realized that this is in really bad shape. So we scheduled a replacement for the summertime and had that done. Washington bathroom drain. Why they would put a drain 6 feet deep in the school, I don't know. But right in the bathroom, we have to tear out the floor in the bathroom and get to the sewer line. So we did that. It was a big expense. South High has a roof drain internal problem where we're working on a solution right now where the roof is, the water from the rain is entering the tunnel. There's a crack in the line, several places it cracks. And of course, it's very difficult to get to because there's occupants up above. So anyway, we have to come up with a solution to fix that. some of the Hawthorne people know this, Claire Barton people, but a car decided to run into the side of the school and enter part of the school, so we got that repaired for about $12,000, I think is what that cost. In fact, they have not yet apprehended the man who has the car yet, so they're looking for him, so I don't know where that's at. But and the most recent ice storm at the Eagles, ice jammed up or dammed up on the downspout and diverted water right around where it was supposed to flow, and it went right through a door into the building. And of course, that's going to be a large expense, but we have to clean it up before we get any other damage. So those are the types of things, though, that are unexpected that happen, and that's just maintenance, I guess. So typically, you do approve about $2.8 million for contract and maintenance to help with these needs. As you know, since 2000, we have built a lot of very large schools, and they have a lot of parking lots and a lot of roofs. So, you know, we really want to keep that in mind so that 10, 15 years from now, when we do need maintenance, we have to sort of plan for that. And we want to get all the life expectancy we can out of each roof section or each parking lot. So we don't want to replace it prematurely, but we want to make sure it's not a hazard to anybody either. So that's the difficult part, is to think 10 years ahead, and when is that concrete going to fail, or when is that roof going to start leaking? So we try to do a good job at that. So this year, Brock and Dr. Schatz had asked if I would talk a little bit about what we're going to do this year. Again, this is just a list, but we're going to be doing the district parking lot. Hawthorne Elementary is going to have 9 classrooms that's going to get new casework inside, just like Madison and McKinley did last year. Horace Mann is going to have the bathrooms upgraded. Lewis and Clark, parking lot drains and a fire alarm system upgrade. Lincoln, a roof section at the school over there, and some parking lot repairs. Madison will most likely get a message sign and some roof section to complete that roof. I believe that's the last section to finish that school. Longfellow has some carpet areas. McKinley's going to get some outside lighting upgrades. Roosevelt, new lockers. Ben Franklin, new clock system, replace some electrical panels. Davies, domestic water heater, storm drain repairs that are caving in. North High, 4 section of roofs, some carpet in some areas, some building automation upgrades, and HVAC upgrades in some areas. South High, storm drain repair in the northwest lot. 4 roof sections there, carpet in the hallways, possible gym floor replacement, air handler upgrade, and then some selective electrical panels throughout the building that are in need of upgrade. And then a duct detector upgrade, which has been some trouble for us up there. We're trying to get that resolved and get rid of those nuisance alarms. And Agassiz, domestic water line sewer work, clock system, and then some tuck pointing in the old part of the 1911 building. And of course, with all that work, we did finish the Eagles on time and on budget, and also we will be completing the Operations Center building here on 40th Avenue, which will be a nice complement to what we have. So, and as I was preparing this, I realized that this is the first time in 10 years that there's really nothing planned after the Operations Center that's really on the drawing board. So it's sort of fun to just sit back and do maintenance. So, so it's been always something out there, yeah. Of course, I haven't talked to you anymore today, so there might be something, who knows. What we're going to do next year, too, we're going to try to focus on some energy savings devices that are out there. There'll be more to come on that, I believe. But anyway, we're going to try to do a better job at just really keeping our expenses down in the utilities if we can. And then also we are doing a study on some lighting, LED lighting in the parking lot, in the classrooms, and that type of thing. So, anyway, that's just a snippet of what we're doing of the large projects, and there's just a ton of little things that happen every day, you can imagine. So, anyway, with that, that's sort of all I had prepared. Didn't know if you have any more than that, but any questions at all?
Thank you very much, Jim, and I would be remiss if I didn't note how photogenic you were on the front page of the paper the other day.
I am selling autographs for 25 cents a piece.
That's a way to wake up in the morning, let me tell you. That was a delight to see, and it was just so great to see that kind of highlighting such
Yeah.
positive part of our district.
Yeah.
And thanks you. Oh, Brock, you were fine too. So, any comments or?
It's been an interesting project because, we're pretty good at building schools, but this is a little different than what we're used to. So it took a little more thought process and planning because we just don't do that. But
Creativity and
yes.
critical thinking.
Yes,
And,
yes. So,
very good. Any questions or comments? Brock?
Madam President, members of the board, as Jim mentioned, the 10-year plan for operational maintenance is just one component of the long-range facilities plan, and you'll see the updated plan at our next meeting. But that really is the roadmap for Jim and his team and how we really keep up with the entire district. And you know, obviously, because of your work, how large the district is and what it covers in the city of Fargo and within our boundaries. And that really gives us an opportunity, as you looked at or heard some of the examples, we try very hard to make sure we're doing things at certainly most, if not all of the buildings on an annual basis. We can't afford to have a backlog where you get a big list of deferred maintenance because you keep pushing those off. And putting this long-range facilities plan in place has really given us the opportunity to keep our eye on the ball, stay focused on which items have to happen this year. Jim and his team have done a phenomenal job of saying, okay, here's our list. And when the new budget starts, we get going and we work through it all year long and make sure that we are keeping up so we don't get that backlog. So, I hope that you recognize really what it takes to keep a district like this running. And certainly, I've said to you many times, I get to come to these meetings and get a lot of the credit for the things that go on in business services, but you're seeing Jim and his team, they really run everything that happens in our facilities area. I have complete trust and faith in his whole team. He put together these three gentlemen in a role to really build a leadership team, and that's been so good for our entire district. It gives better contact to all of the buildings. They know who to get in touch with and make sure that we're keeping up on that work. And I sit and get a lot of the credit for all the work that they do. And so I want to thank all of them publicly and know how much they are appreciated for everything that they do for us. And we couldn't continue to operate the district as we do without competent people like them. And it's always interesting to note, we know in a school district we hire teachers and we hire principals, but if you want to be a plumber, you wouldn't necessarily apply at Fargo Public Schools. But we've got an entire staff of everything under the sun to operate a district, and I think you heard some evidence of that tonight too. So thank you all for your work, and certainly if there are any questions about this plan, you'll see the update at our next meeting, and there may be some additional questions once you see that as well.
Thank you, Brock. Anyone else? Sure, Dr. Schatz.
I think I'd be remiss with what we've been doing over the last 3 months throughout the district, educating people about the financial state of the school district, to say that when people have been pressing me most recently about what's at stake if financially the school district cannot receive new revenues to continue to do the things that we do, what you heard Jim talking about is what's at stake on that side of the aisle. We talk about academics, we talk about programs, we talk about staffing. But one of the things when 5 years ago when we started this whole long-range facility plan, there really wasn't one that existed that is like what we have today, and that has been a great guide. And at that time, it determined that a school district this large needed to make sure they invest in these facilities and the upkeep so that you don't get that backlog that Brock talked about and those types of things. If revenues don't come forward, you will be reverting back to those types of environments because there will be no way that you will be able to do these things. And that's what's at stake. And so we'll be talking, I'm sure, plenty about the academic side of the aisle, but this is one side too that we can't lose sight of. And another reason why this strategic plan was strategically put together to include this side of it, so that it encompasses everything we do as a school district. And so again, Brock, Jim, the team, it's great work, but that's what's at stake. And so I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. Well, thanks again, all of you, for all your good work. And I think it is a testament to the power of planning when you said that that is a living document that you consult all the time as guidance is great. So thanks for all your good work. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you
making
for
the
having
time to
us.
come tonight. We appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, and Brock, long-range
All right,
financial plan, and
Ma-
that is in front of us.
Yes,
So
Madam
we have to-
President, members of the board, much like the 10-year plan for operational maintenance, what you have in front of you today is really the nuts and bolts of the finances, the forecasting of the long-range financial plan. And you'll see that updated report at our next meeting as well. This is really the first year, as you recall, with all of our long-range plans, we have annual reviews, and this is the first year now of the annual review of the long-range financial plan. So what I hope to do for you tonight is to walk you through very briefly kind of some of the assumptions we're making, how we're looking at the current state of the financial affairs of the district, and then when you see the plan, this will be one portion of the plan that will certainly cover a variety of other things as well. Let's start with the single page that you have on top, which is the analysis of the mill levy reduction, and certainly, as you know, we've been talking about the mill levy freeze and the effect that that has on the district. This is the first year, 16-17 fiscal year, in which we have the frozen revenues on the property tax side. And what we tried to give you here is a look at what do we think is going to happen with the best information we have available today, and how will that freeze impact the district, and what do we stand to see in unrealized revenue. So for fiscal year 17, as you know, we had an increase of just over 10% in valuation, and so what that meant to us is, had we not been frozen, we would have collected an additional, on the very bottom, unrealized revenues. We would have collected approximately $4.5 million this year had we been able to realize the growth at that 10%. That would have had the mill at $350,000, or actually the mill is at $350,000 this year. And as you know from the presentations and the discussions we've had, that has then arbitrarily lowered our mill rate from 129 to 127, and that's where we sit today. So then we said, okay, how do things look as we go forward? Well, all indications as we look at the financial state of the market here, what's happening within Fargo, we suspect that we may still see some of these 8% increases in valuation over the next couple of years. What we're hearing from the folks that we talk to is that's probably not sustainable long term. And as you know, we've been anywhere from right around 2%, just in the time I've been in the district in 6 years. My very first year here, valuation increases were 1.8%. Last year, they were 10.1%. So that's really, those are the bookends of what I've seen in 6 years, and so that's how volatile the market can be. All indications are we'll probably see some nice valuation growth over the next couple of years, but we think we'll revert back to more of a 5% going forward. So what this does is this just lays out each fiscal year. In fiscal year 18, if we get that 8%, the valuation would be up to 378. If you compare that to what our base year is, then next year we would have otherwise collected an additional $7.6 million on top of our base year. 19, then we're thinking, okay, now maybe you see a 5% increase, and you just see how it rolls forward. So you see each year of unrealized revenue is what we would get if we were at the 127 mills at that valuation compared to what we're getting today, all right? Then to the far left, you see in fiscal year 25 and beyond, I've highlighted 4 numbers for you there. The 81.25 is really the first opportunity where if the mill levy stays frozen at 81.25, you could theoretically levy the 70 mill cap, and you could use the miscellaneous mills, and if these things hold true with valuation growth, you could get to a point where you'd start realizing revenues in 2025 if you're using all the tools in your toolbox available to you. If you look at just the 70 mil cap and not utilize some of the other things available to you in statute, 2028 by these projections would be the first year where you'd start to realize any additional revenues from property tax. So that really is the impact of the freeze and what we would have in unrealized revenue each year as we go forward. Again, if I knew that this was in fact going to happen and these were the valuations, who knows where I would be sitting projecting economic indicators. Probably not here, but you never know. I love North Dakota, so I might be. So just know that this is based on the best historical knowledge and what we're hearing from the folks that we work with right now. So any questions on that? This isn't necessarily new to you. It's just another way to look at what we've been talking about. Okay. So then what we did, and you have 2 sheets in front of you, and the top one should say at the top, Fargo Public Schools District 10-year historical, general fund, no grants, and then you see it says under that 3% salary increase. And the reason we put that in is we all know that salary and benefits make up about 80% of our operating budget. And at least in the time I've been here, and I'll look at Jim, he's probably had the longest stint on the board. We've given salary increases. My guess is every year you've been involved, Jim, certainly every year I've been here. So typically we know there's something that happens. So we have to pick a number so that we can do some forecasting. So that's why that is on there. And let's just talk briefly about the revenues for the time being. What we did in our forecasting is we worked off of what we know today, which is frozen property tax. So you see in the local property tax area, all of those 1,100 to 1,200 revenue lines are generally flat. And if you look at 2018 and going forward, actually look at our current fiscal year of 2017, the revenue and property tax has 1.6% increase this year, but then has a decrease as you go forward. So flat or a decrease going forward based on what would happen if we stay flat. On the local revenue side, again, we see some increases there, and part of that is based on some sales of, that's skewed in the current fiscal year because of sales of district homes crossing fiscal years, and we had more sales of homes that we build, et cetera. That's not always the case, so that bumped that number up. But as you really see going forward, those are small increases, and in the grand scheme of $150 million, it's a minimal portion of your overall revenues. I highlighted on my sheet under the state revenue 3110. You see in the current fiscal year we have about a 3.4% increase in 17 in the per pupil aid and really the state revenues as a whole. And then you start to see our state revenues going backwards, and there's two reasons for that. One, all indications are, at best, we will stay flat in this current legislative session or have a very modest increase potentially in year 2. So all of our revenue would have to come as a result of enrollment increase. Because it's a student-based formula, if we have more students, we would get more revenue. But the reason predominantly that you see it going down is the double jeopardy situation we've talked about in regards to the deduction, the 60 mil deduction of the local effort. So our 60 mil deduction is taken times, in 2018 will be multiplied times $350,000 a mil, not 317. And so our local deduction goes up while our local effort stays flat. So that's the impact of that. You see our per pupil aid going down by about $1.4 million as a result of the nature of how the formula accounts for your local deduction. And then you just see the impact of that going forward, and what you will see is Fargo Public Schools would not see new money under the current funding formula until 2020, where all of a sudden, based on either growth or what we built into these projections, is a 0.5% increase because all indications are it will be flat or very modest. So we wouldn't see any new foundation aid money until 2020 in this modeling going forward. So again, you see what that impact is on state revenue. If you get to near the bottom, you have the total revenues, and what you're seeing there is we had a small increase of 3% in this current year, but as we go forward into 2018 and beyond with everything we know today, we have a reduction or less than a 1% increase in revenues in total going forward. So that's how we base the revenue side. Any questions on revenues before I'll just point out some highlights on the expense side. On the expense side then, just briefly, I'll just highlight a couple of areas. As I said to you, for point of having something to forecast, we put in a 3% multiplier on salary, but we put that in only for those things that are not additional. So for example, if you look at, on the front page, line 114 is study committee. Well, there's not an increase for study committee, so that's an extra pay. Those that are on study committee get whatever that portion is, but that doesn't necessarily go up. That's a flat amount. But those that are tied to a direct schedule or whatever, we put in a 3% multiplier to drive that. We did the same thing on the benefit side. And I will highlight 4 areas for you, starting with object code 220. So 220, 231, 232, and 260, FICA, TFFR, PERS, and workers' comp are all escalators tied to salary. They're a percent of salary. So if salary goes up, they increase by whatever that percentage is. If salary does not go up, those do not go up. So again, we tied in that same 3%. And yes, Jim, I'm aware that the health will likely grow by more than that, but we need to get some basis. And what the board has told us is that the employer share of health insurance should not increase more than the increase in the budget. And so the current year, the budget increased about 3%, so we use 3%. And that's something that would be talked about as we go forward. Some other areas I'll point out, you heard Jim Free just talk about 439, which is contracted maintenance. Last year we had 2.7 million if you round it up. This current year we have 2 million. So as you know, we reduced that line in our general fund budget this year, and we've held that flat going forward. So that's a reduction in operational maintenance from what our plan had called for. But again, life is about choices, and that's one of the choices that we made when we brought you a balanced budget for the current year. Did you want to say something before I go on? You look like you do.
Yeah. And that was a good point. I want to remind people that in order for us to bring you a balanced budget this year, let's think back to last year, okay, as we built this budget. And so as we do this presentation, you've heard me say that we cut back in certain line items that were not salary and benefits, things that people don't normally see. And so this, just remember, when you look at this and he says that, we did that work last year, okay? So.
Yep. And 3 other areas where we've done exactly what Dr. Schatz has talked about. So in line 610 on the last page, the supply line, yes, there's an increase in 2017 over 2016. The reason for that is purely tied to career and tech ed supplies or materials for homes being built. So it runs through our general fund, and then when we sell those homes, then it's kind of an in and an out. But if you break that out of there, that supply line, we took a look at what did we spend last year, and although there may have been requests for increases, we tried to hold that line as flat as we could because, again, that's an area where we need to just take a hard look at what we're doing. The other lines, if you go to equipment, 733 and 735, you'll see that in the current budget, we reduced the current fiscal year from the prior fiscal year, and then starting in 2018 and going forward, we reduced those even more. We took $480,000 out of the equipment line, and we took another almost about $200,000 out of the technology equipment line. And again, it's about as we have to spread things out going forward, those are areas that we reduced to not impact human resources and programs. We tried to reduce in other areas to try to get where we are. So with all that being said, the outlook for 2018 would show that we have a $3.9 million budget deficit with all those assumptions that we made, and then you see the impact of those assumptions going forward. The following year it's $7 million, the year after that 10.6, and on as we go forward. So that is kind of the basis of how we built the assumptions. Anywhere on the right side in the yellow where you see that it says forecast, what we do is we build into the spreadsheet itself some factors based on past history, and it just automatically forecasts for us, so we can tweak those factors, and we are happy to take direction as you see the new plan going forward and areas that we would need to talk about. So again, those are the assumptions that we have. I brought you another sheet, and I brought you this sheet as a point of comparison only. I want to be very clear about that. Especially as we look to our friends to my left and really all of us who are employed in the district. The second spreadsheet you have is the exact same information with one exception. We took salaries and flatlined them and said, what if in the district at 80% of our expenses we did 0 across the board for salaries? And what does that mean for us? Well, we had a $3.9 million deficit in the model we just talked about. It takes the deficit in next year to $830,000, so still a deficit. The reason I ran that model is to give you an impact of, we've heard what's going on in the state, right? That in the paper today, NDSU is preparing for 15% budget cuts. State agencies are talking about 10% budget cuts. If we had to get to 0 across the board, what does that mean for us as a district? And even then, we're still in a deficit, and we would need to look at some other things we would have to reduce. So again, it's a point of comparison. I want to be clear about that. I'm not advocating we go there. I just think you need to have the information for assumptions, and then as we build our the narrative on the updated long-range financial plan, you will give us some input on, okay, what types of assumptions should be in there as we go forward. So with that, I'll try to take some questions. This is just the introductory piece of the long-range financial plan. We will be, you'll be digesting this, and at our next meeting, you'll see the entire document and then have some additional input, I'm sure, at that time as well. I'll take any questions you might have now.
Thank you, Brock. Dr. Schatz?
Just one thing, Brock, that you and I had gone through that I think everybody needs to look at too, is that as you started to project forward like 2018, 2019, I want you to go just to the supplies and materials as an example, if everybody would do that. If you look at in 2017, $7,479,000, you move that over and you can look that there's $100,000 less there. You go up to other purchase services, over 100,000 less. So when you look at the total, what you see is that not only are you looking at a deficit of 830,000, but you also see adjusted lines even further down within some of the other areas. And so when you add that up, you really have a $1.5 million deficit. If you go to the $4 million one that he talked about, you really have about a $5 million deficit, because there's other additional decreases built in just to keep us close to what we think it might be. And so you're dealing with anywhere from 1.5 million to probably 5 million between a 0% to 3% variance. And so as we looked at this, just remember, make sure you look through all the lines to see the totals and compare them to the years before. And again, this is just forecasting to give people an idea of what could be if all these scenarios were to be there. So just wanted to point that out.
And Madam President, members of the board, if you tie all of these documents together, remember that we said in the current year you had unrealized revenues of about 4.5 million, but you had a deficit, if you look into next year, of 4 million. And so Dr. Schatz has been very clear that as we go forward with our specified mill levy, that is just one component. It's 30% of our revenue funding model. So if we are successful in that regard, that doesn't fix everything if the state projections don't see something change, which is 65% of our funding model, and all indications are that, you know, for the next biennium, that's going to be lean at best. And so we need to understand that there's some offsets there, and it doesn't fix everything. And we've been trying to be very clear as we've done those presentations, but certainly it's a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Brock. Rebecca?
Under supplies and materials, 611 paper, that's correct, right? Or can you explain that to me? Am I not reading it how I'm supposed to be reading it? The difference in 2016 and 2017 and on?
Yes, so what's happening there is really that's a difference in how we are now billing for the services that we use through the print shop. And so we are making sure that there is an expense certainly tied to buildings for paper that they use for that which they print. Rather than the print shop, you know, obviously it's all internal to Fargo Public Schools, but rather than having a department that sits with a pure cost center with no revenue, then there are expenses tied to buildings. Those who order more spend more, those who curb those services spend less, and it just gives us an ability to track that better. That's why you see such a change there going forward. It's a business practice change internally to give us better data to monitor expense of a department.
Any other questions? or discussion? We'll take a break now. We'll digest this. If you have any questions coming back before we put this to rest, feel free. But we'll come back in 6:50, 10:02. Thanks. I think we'll round this up again. Jim informs me that, have no fear, you will see all of this again. So if you're not up for an in-depth discussion of it tonight, I think it's certainly something we've talked about many times, but it's good to see it laid out and every time we get more clarity and those numbers tend to stick in your head and you kind of know what's coming at us. Last call for any comments on the financial forecast? Great, thank you for bringing this forward. And that it moves us in kind of a related way to the legislative update, and I'm sure the question about are we going to approach the issue of the 60 mil deduct will be part of that. So Brock, go ahead.
All right, Madam President, members of the board, well, let's just start there then, I guess. There have been lots of ongoing conversations, both with local legislators who have said they're interested in taking up that cause and seeing what, if anything, they can do. How do we go about that? Is it new legislation? Is it an adjustment to existing legislation, et cetera? The answer is yes. It could be any of those things. Anita Thomas at State School Board is helping us. We are waiting. Jerry Coleman from DPI was gone over the holidays, and so we're coordinating a conference call between Jerry and Anita and myself and Senator Sorvag and Senator Davison, who have said they'd be willing to take a look at this and get some additional information. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, specifically in regard to that 60 mil deduct. I've had lots of conversations with my colleagues throughout the state. There's lots of opinions about that deduct and a case to be made on various sides of that, but just know that as much as sustainable long-term funding was our primary legislative initiative, that ties directly to that deduct piece in the formula, because those two things, for Fargo especially, are in lockstep with one another. And so we continue to stay on top of that and work with the people we feel necessary to try to help us with that. Beyond that, I sent to all of you today a hearing schedule for those bills that are on our tracking list that have scheduled hearings this week. Currently, there are 306 bills introduced. We have 25 on our tracking list. I'm working on a better format to get you our entire tracking list. And of course, Monday is the last day for representatives to introduce bills, and then senators have an extension beyond that. So there will be more bills introduced. We'll be adding to it, and hopefully, I would say in a week to two, we should have a list that is pretty much okay. There won't be new stuff beyond this, and then we'll get that out to you. In regards to that which is happening this week, I would point out on that tracking list, we've met, right? So I jump all over the place, so we're going to go down the list a little bit. So House Bill 1073 and 1013 are the DPI funding bills. One is the governor's version, one is the bill that's been introduced. And so they're both being heard in House Appropriations this week, specifically in regards to funding through DPI. That being said, there currently is not a K-12 funding bill introduced. It's being worked on. All indications are it's being carried around in some version, but there's still work being done on it. And so as soon as there is one, that will become the bill that we stay on top of first and foremost, but certainly there's a lot of other pieces of legislation that are out there. If you listen to Governor Burgum's address, he talked about the revenue forecast being $1.5 billion below forecast. So I've heard anything from Dr. Schatz, and I heard recently $2 billion. So I'd say $1.5 to $2 billion in state revenue shortfalls. And so we'll see how the legislature decides to work through that. Some bills of interest, and I know Dinah and I both got asked for some information on one of them today. House Education is hearing 4 bills, all introduced by at least one of the same legislators, and they are 1140, 1141, 1142, and 1143. So we'll take them in numerical order. 1140, and for any of those of you who, I'll try to remember House Bill, Senate Bill, but just an FYI, if it begins with a 1, it's a House Bill. If it begins with a 2, it's a Senate Bill, in case I forget to say. So House Bill 1140 is relating to school membership and advisory boards. And what that bill does is says, if the Board of Education puts together an advisory committee to give you advice on capital construction, that the makeup of that committee has to be proportionate based on how you collect your taxes. So if 80% of your tax collections come from residential property, then 80% of your committee should be from residential property owners. If 10% come from ag property, then 10% of your committee should come from ag owner, et cetera. The conversation, and Rebecca was with us on the call on Friday, the general conversation that we had about that bill is we would recommend as an administration that we would oppose that bill purely from a local control perspective. We believe that we as a district know our constituents, we know our tax base, and that we would think that it's important that we reach out to a cross-section of the community and get good advice. We made a decision not to go out and testify on the bill, but that would be what we would recommend to you if pressed for a official position on the bill, and I think that's open for discussion certainly. 1141 really ties to that bill, which is in the event that you have these advisory committees, then those are subject to open record laws. And we certainly had said we could support that or stay neutral on it, because pretty much everything we do, we notice and it's open. When we did the Long Range Facilities Task Force, we probably didn't have to notice it, we noticed it. I mean, we pretty much are an open book at Fargo Public Schools, so we thought, we're doing that, it doesn't impact us, so we would be fine with that. I worry when you look at me that way.
It's a team effort, right? I don't even know why that bill would be there, because we're open records and no matter what we do. Anybody can request at any time anything that we've done, whether it's an email I wrote or whether it's a committee we have or a task force or. So I'm really, we struggled with that one as to why that's even coming forward. There must be an issue somewhere. So, but we already do that, so.
House Bill 1142 is the next one. It's being heard tomorrow in House Ed, and that one is an interesting bill. It's approval of new school construction, and so what that bill says in a nutshell is those dollars which you have in a general fund ending fund balance, which are not intended for capital construction, cannot be used for capital construction. So in our case in Fargo, we could use the balance in our building fund to build facilities. But if this bill were to pass, we could not use the balance in our general fund balance, the 20% that we have, for capital construction. We believe that it would be the administration's position that we would oppose that bill because it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. Our funding model, we haven't used general fund dollars and ending fund balance for any of those purposes. However, if we chose to do that for a capital construction purpose, and it allowed us to not raise new taxes, wouldn't that be a win-win? So,
my question is, how is it written? And you said it relates to new school construction. We have used our general fund balance to do additions or enhancements to existing buildings. Didn't we do the Kennedy expansion or some other kinds of additions? Or Centennial Gym?
we did that. Excuse me. We did, and we did that through the fund balance by approving a deficit budget for capital projects. The bill title says new school construction. The bill narrative says capital projects. And so I think as we worked with West Fargo and Rebecca was there, we believe the legislative intent is to prohibit general fund dollars for going toward capital projects, that either you should go to a vote and then what typically we know if you go to a vote is because you're raising taxes in order to fund a project, or you have a building fund or whatever the case may be. So, you know, we're monitoring that right now. I think that warrants some discussion about would we outwardly oppose that? Again, I think it's open for debate, and our recommendation would be to oppose it because, again, it's about control, and if we could not raise taxes and utilize funds that are there, isn't that prudent management? However, I'm sure there's obviously other people who think otherwise, or it wouldn't be introduced, so. And then the last one is House Bill 1143 of that grouping, and we really had no recommendation on a position. What that bill says is for those districts that have under 1,000 students, K-12, if they wanted to, if two districts wanted to hire one superintendent as a joint superintendent for two districts, then the law would allow them to do that, putting a specific number in place of under 1,000 students. And again, our general position was it wouldn't impact us, and so we don't know why we would get out in front of that. So it's just putting some of those provisions in place. I know there's some joint superintendents, I think is that look I'm getting over here. My understanding is the change is in the under 1,000. So I think it's being more, it's probably broadening who could do it is the deal. So for example, I will give you a personal example. Today, Central Cass does not fall under that, but under this rule could fall under that because they have under 1,000 students, K-12. But today, that wouldn't be the case, So those are really the big items this week, and some of them big, some of them not. Obviously, the DPI funding bill is there. We are waiting for the K-12 funding bill to come out, and we'll continue to keep you posted on that. And we will continue to monitor and keep things going. There was a lot of conversation on our call Friday, some brainstorming, some we think this bill's coming but we haven't seen it yet, or we think that bill's coming but we haven't seen it yet. So as those things happen, we'll keep you in the loop on that.
Great, thank you, Jim.
Give any kind of a definition to a capital project or define a capital project above X? Because this is the very line in our budget we just looked at as $2 million. Somebody could argue every one of those expenditures is a capital project.
Excuse me. No, they did not. The bill is very small in narrative. It talks about a process for approval, which we have now through DPI, so that part's not new. And it basically just adds that demonstrate capacity through a method that does not include the expenditure of funds obtained from the ending fund balance of a school district, which funds are intended for use toward operational costs of the district. That's the new language.
So did I catch that right? It references where you have to get DPI approval?
Correct, which is currently in the process.
Because we wouldn't need DPI approval for a new alarm system.
Correct.
So there are certain types of things that could be called a capital project that don't require us sending anything out to DPI.
That is correct.
And I bet you most of our $2 million maintenance line would be items that don't require DPI involvement.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't understand your question. Operational maintenance, like we're doing that we just talked about, would not fall under this provision at all.
Okay.
Though it would be things like additions, new construction, those types of things. I think the additions is an interesting question, which isn't specifically addressed in the new language. I think the question there would be, is that a new facility, or is that maintaining an existing facility? Maintenance of existing is fine and doesn't need this approval. But the things like the Centennial Gym that we did, the Kennedy addition, we did those through our general fund, and all indications as we read this would tell you that the legislative intent is that you couldn't do that any longer. But legislative intent is a sticky wicket, so.
Brock, maybe you want to mention, because this wasn't on our list, but we got it today, the 3% valuation bill.
Yeah, thank you. So there's a 3% valuation bill. So there's.
You want me to go?
No.
You
So
go,
there's
I
a-
go.
There's a bill, and we did get some indication of this as we met with legislators before the session started, that there would be legislation introduced that would cap political subs' growth of budgets. And the bill we saw today says that a political subdivision could not have budget increases beyond 3% annually. And so it would be a way to try to control growth in places like ours. And this part of it, I think, is, as we discussed with legislators before the session, this is some individuals' effort to say, well, it doesn't matter what happens with valuation increases, it doesn't matter what happens with mill levies, because you can only grow at 3% anyway. We heard 4%, the bill says 3%. So this is at least one group who sponsored the bill's intention to try to say, forget about all that other stuff. Here's the cap that you can grow no matter what.
So if you have stepping outside of school districts, if you have a city like Watford City that's growing at 20% a year, they could only grow their city budget 3% a year?
Yeah, as I read it, it said political subdivisions, and so that would be true, what you're saying. And my guess is, much like is common, I mean, I don't want to speak for any legislators, but we see emergency appropriations all the time just for those types of things, and would they allow that? I don't know the answer to that. I think it depends. I think it depends how broad support is for this growth model. If there's a desire to contain growth, and it's pretty broadly held in the halls in the Capitol, then their willingness to go beyond that, I don't know.
We already have 12% cap on valuation increase, so this would put it at 3%. There's a great model of this when you look at what happened in Las Vegas, because I was looking for where is there a place that's similar to what we're going through. And what happened during the growth period before 2008, 2009 was that valuation increases were going through the roof. And they were building a whole new subdivisions to Las Vegas itself, and adding a school, adding a firehouse, adding a police station, all those homes and things. And then when the market crashed and everything went down, all of a sudden those valuations were gone. But during that increase of time, the legislature said, school districts, municipalities are taking too much of the valuation increase. They were taking tons of money to build all this stuff. So they put a 3% valuation cap. And so then when everything crashed and there was no money, and then when valuations started to come back and they're trying to get out of their budget issues, they can't access any more than 3%. They're $40 million in the hole in just the school district because they can't access any new dollars. And so this really is what Al Carlson was talking about in his editorial when he said that if local municipalities don't stop taking these percentage of value increases, we're going to mandate it to you and we're going to bring it back to you. And he said 3%. So that's city, it's county, it's parks, and it's us. And so this would have a major impact on overall local budgets. And so it'll be interesting to see what the conversation is moving forward, but it's one this is one to watch. So, yeah.
Anything else, Brock? Okay, any questions? David?
What's the number of that?
I believe it's 1129, but don't quote me on that. It just came out today, and it just got posted today. So when it gets up for hearing, we'll have that on the list, so make sure you watch for it. We can double check and get that out to you.
Jennifer?
Did you say you were planning to testify on 1142 or not? Or is...
As of now, we are not. It's scheduled for hearing tomorrow, and we were not planning to go out and testify. This might be one of those that if the board has strong opinions that we maybe put together a bill talking points. For those of you who haven't seen, a lot of times what we will do is if we have a bill that we need people's help in talking to legislators, we'll put together a single page that'll have the bill number, FPS's official position, a brief narrative of what it means, and then 4 or 5 talking points. So all of us are saying the same things to our legislators as to here are the reasons we think it's important. So you'll see those throughout the session. If this is one of those bills, we certainly could have that put together, I don't know. You were there for the conversation, Rebecca. I don't know, where we fall on that as a district.
Jim?
Oh, I was just gonna say, we could have some of that conversation here, but it seemed like we were kind of waiting to learn more information before we decided how to move forward.
I would say this is not one we want to be visible on, because we have tools in our tool shed, quite frankly, very few districts have. So this is really a sticky wicket for smaller districts that don't have a voter-approved building fund. This is the tool they use. So you're going to have a lot of small to mid-sized districts who are going to be testifying, you can't do this to us, this will kill us. And I just think, not to say we couldn't take a position, and we probably should, but I don't think we want to be the visible leaders on this particular issue. I think we want to keep ourselves in a position to really advocate on hills that we don't want to die on. Because quite frankly, outside of the couple of projects that were noted, this is not our intent going forward anyway. It's just the opposite. We're trying to wean ourselves off of using the general fund, which has really been through building authority lease payments, and put it all on the building fund for capital projects. So I would be supportive of taking a no position on this thing, but I don't think we want to be the visible party on it at all.
Excellent point.
And one last note, you do know that Kyle is currently not out there, right? Okay.
Good point. Yep, I think powder dry is going to be our biggest strategy this year, and which things do we dare speak out on and why. But good. Any other thoughts or questions on any of these? So we have our weekly phone conference call with the West Fargo staff. I don't believe we noticed that, so Rebecca, you've been attending as GAC chair, is that correct? And I think.
Yeah, I was on the call.
Okay. So I think we'll have to be very careful about if more people want to show up. But thank you for, and if you can't make it, call a committee member. And yeah, great. You got a plan. Way ahead of me. All right, any other final thoughts on the legislative update? Thank you for staying on top of that, Brock, and for sharing that. Brings us to the consent agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve those items, including the HR update.
I move that we approve the consent agenda, including the HR update.
Second.
Motion and a second, thank you. All in favor of approving the items on the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carried, thank you. Brings us to our business portion. We have two items. Board compensation. This is the time of year that we have this conversation. Usually it's kind of a boring one, but last year it was a little action-packed. You have the history of last year's discussion in front of you. We are currently, our salary, our board compensation is at $1,000 per month, and it has been at that level since 2009. Last year there was a action made to increase it, which was rescinded a few months later as we were further into the budget process. So I'd entertain a motion to start discussion if anyone has one they would like to throw out. Rebecca.
I have a question. So since it said information and possible action, does that mean do we need to have a motion on this or not?
We wouldn't. If we want to keep things where they are, we would not need to take any action tonight. If you want to make a motion asserting that we want to keep things the way we are to give planning solid direction, we could go either way. But we need to give planning some direction as to how the board feels on this issue. I'll just open up for discussion then. Rebecca.
I think it's best to have a motion, so there is direction. So I would make a motion that we continue at the $1,000 per month rate, which was effective as of January 1st, 2009, for this next year.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There's been a motion and a second to maintain the current compensation for the board at $1,000 per month. Any discussion? Okay, Anne Marie, if you'd call the roll, please.
Paulson,
Yes.
Rodenbiker,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Goldenberg,
Yes.
Johnson,
No.
Knutson,
Yes.
Boyd.
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. Planning will use that number going forward. Appreciate it. Monitoring of EL 15, thank you for those who responded. Unless anyone has comments to add, which were not included in your written assessment. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to receive and file this.
I move that we receive and file the EL 15 Student Learning Environment and Discipline as recorded.
I'll second.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second to receive and file the monitoring of EL 15. Anne Marie, if you would call the roll, please.
Rodenbiker,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Goldenberg,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Boyd.
Yes, motion carried. Thank you. We will have as a placeholder for the next several months, agenda item number 9, a possible executive session for the purpose of negotiation strategy. I apologize, I was not available to come to the first meeting, but I have not heard that we need this session tonight for discussion unless, David, you and your committee have anything to discuss.
Madam President, we met for the first time with the teachers last Thursday, and we set up the next meeting for February 16th. So I think between now and then, we need it. I don't think it's necessary tonight.
Okay, thank you. Just let me know when you're ready to have something for us to discuss in executive session. Appreciate it, and thank you for the work of your committee. Brings us to board reports. John, would you start us out tonight?
Nothing new, thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Okay, so I attended the PTA meeting last night where Dr. Schatz gave, I think, his final mill levy presentation for the schools at least. For PTAs. So, and it was fabulous as always. A very engaged audience, lots of good questions. And the other thing that I have to report on really is the Communications Committee met yesterday, and we began to discuss and review the summary of our public focus group responses. And one of the items that surfaced to bring forward, and I might as well do it now, we may have other items because this is certainly something that couldn't be covered in one meeting. But transportation was discussed, and it was suggested that it would be a good retreat topic item. And so it would be the consensus or the recommendation of the committee that we ask administration to gather up that transportation study and any additional questions maybe that we might have, and prepare that for a summer retreat. So, do I have to make a motion to do that?
I don't think at this
Okay.
point. I think that's fine.
All
Appreciate
right.
it, though. Thank
That's
you.
it.
Great, thank you. Rebecca?
I, New Year's Eve, attended the Round Dance that the Native American Commission helped to sponsor. So that was a fun event, a good, safe, healthy event for a couple hundred people to be at. And the next meeting for GAC is 7:30 a.m. on January 17th. Thank you, Brock, for all the details and your guidance. And I was at communications yesterday. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Jim?
Nothing to report.
That might be a first. Wow. I do have to say, it was fun hearing about the training of project-based learning that happened through SEEK. Do you know, and I'm putting you on the spot, but do you know how many other districts are kind of taking advantage of this training, or is some of this stuff happening in some of the smaller schools in our district?
Most of SEEK stuff happens in smaller schools in our district, although Fargo and West Fargo interface quite a bit as well. I'm going to guess we probably got over 20 districts currently that are engaged either in getting trained through project-based learning, which is what they were talking about, but probably even more so in multi-tier support strategies, which I think has been a real need out in the smaller districts in particular. I mean, we've got a pretty good teaching and learning division, not even pretty good, we have the best. And that's a luxury, quite frankly, that only large school districts have. In smaller school districts, the entire teaching and learning team is the superintendent and principal and the 3 teachers that they have. So most of the trainings are really focused on for smaller school districts, although our staff certainly takes advantage of the ones that fit for them too.
Thank you, Jim. Dinah?
With the holiday stuff, it was pretty quiet. I did attend the Eggs and Issues last week, which was interesting to get the state chamber perspective from Minnesota and North Dakota for their legislative issues going forward. So it was sort of a different perspective, but that's it.
Thank you. David?
I just mentioned negotiations, and that's really all that has happened in my court.
Thank you. Christy?
I attended the foundation board meeting about a week and a half ago, and that's it.
Thanks. Brandy?
I'll make this quick since everybody else is making theirs quick. I attended PTA meetings last night at South and at Lewis and Clark, and they had a number of, well, I guess it was the highest number they'd ever had. South had like 20 there, and Lewis and Clark had 25. And then Lewis and Clark just touched on their Envoy program, which was really, really neat to see that. And then communications, and that should do it.
Great, thank you. You have my report out and about. I had every intention of attending a program at Jefferson that I felt really strongly about, and their Day of Compassion, and I ended up having a meeting that went right over the top of it, so that was really bummed. But that was an incredible project that they did last week, or this past week, with high school kids coming in, and that did get some media attention. And Dr. Schatz will be meeting with the arts community this Thursday, so thanks for that. So the legislative social and breakfast that's highlighted, is there anyone who has not said yay or nay to Jolynn if you're planning on going, or Rebecca as GAC chair? We need to know who is going for that. And that is it for my report. Since John Strand is not here, but I do know that Dinah has a birthday tomorrow. So happy birthday, Dinah. Thank you. And unless there are any other items, our next meeting is January 24th. We're adjourned. Thank you.